The north had always been cold, but that morning felt colder than usual. Robb Stark stood on the walls of Winterfell, his eyes fixed on the snow-covered forests beyond. The war had taken much from him, friends, bannermen, even peace. And yet, something had shifted. A secret had come to light, a secret that could change everything. Jon Snow, his half-brother, or so he always believed, had returned from Castle Black with more than stories of the Wall. He came with a letter, old, stained, hidden for years, inside a book in the Night's Watch library. It was written by Lyanna Stark. Her words, soft and trembling, spoke of love, danger, and truth. Jon wasn't Ned Stark's bastard. He was Lyanna's son, her child, born in blood and fear during Robert's rebellion, and his father, Rhaegar Targaryen. Jon had stared at the letter for hours. His hands shook as he handed it to Robb. "I thought I was nothing," he whispered, "but this changes everything." Robb read the letter twice, then a third time. His chest was heavy, his thoughts racing. It all made sense now. Ned Stark's silence, the way he never spoke of Jon's mother, the sadness in his eyes when people mocked Jon as a bastard. Ned had protected his sister's child, knowing that if Robert ever found out, the boy would be killed. "You are not my half-brother," Robb said at last. "You are my cousin, and the true heir to the Iron Throne." Jon shook his head. "I don't want it." Robb's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't matter. You deserve it, and Westeros needs it." In that moment, the two young men made a decision, one that would shape kingdoms. They wouldn't fight for House Stark. They wouldn't fight for the North. They would fight for Lyanna's son, for House Targaryen Stark, but the road ahead was dark. The Lannisters held the crown. Stannis Baratheon marched with fire and smoke. The south was full of enemies, and no one in Westeros would believe a snowboy had royal blood. So they planned in secret. Robb gathered his most loyal bannermen, Greatjon Umber, Maege Mormont, and the Karstarks, and told them the truth. Most didn't believe it at first, but when Jon read Lyanna's letter aloud, when they saw the tears in his eyes and the way he held himself like Ned once did, something changed. "If he is Lyanna's son," Maege Mormont said, "then he has Stark blood in him. That's enough for me. And if he's Rhaegar's son," growled Greatjon, "then that bloody Iron Throne is his by right." Still, they needed more than words. They needed proof. And for that, Robb sent men south, silent riders to find Howland Reed, the last living man who had seen Lyanna alive at the Tower of Joy. If he confirmed the story, if he stood by Jon, then no one could deny it. Meanwhile, Jon and Robb began building an army, but not just of swords. They built something more dangerous, a vision of a united Westeros, not ruled by Lannisters, with gold or Baratheons with fire, but by Starks with honor and Targaryen blood with justice. Robb stepped down from calling himself king in the north. "There will be no King Robb," he declared to his bannermen. "There will be King Jon, the one true heir, my brother, my blood." Some were angry, some called it madness. But Robb reminded them of the cost of war, of the chaos in King's Landing, of how the South laughed at the North, and of the lies that had killed Lyanna. "They killed her to protect their throne," Robb said. "Now her son will take it back." That night, a raven flew into the snow-dark sky, carrying a message to old allies and enemies alike. The rightful king has risen. His name is Jon Targaryen Stark, and he marches for the Iron Throne. The raven's message spread like wildfire. Some laughed. Some tore the letter apart. Others grew quiet, remembering Lyanna Stark's beauty and how Rhaegar had died trying to protect her. But in the north, and even in some parts of the Riverlands, people began to whisper, "Jon Snow, no, Jon Targaryen." In Winterfell, Jon stood in front of the Great Hall, not as a bastard, not as a brother, but as something new, something powerful. The fire from the torches danced across his face, but his eyes were calm, steady. He didn't want a crown. He didn't want power. But if this was what it took to bring justice, to stop the killing, then he would do it. Robb stood beside him, proud but guarded. "We have one shot," he told Jon. "If we go too fast, the South will crush us. If we go too slow, the Lannisters will send assassins to silence you before a sword is even raised." They began to act quickly. Robb sent Catelyn to treat with old friends in the Riverlands, to win them over with truth and promises. Jon rode north to the Wall to speak with Lord Commander Mormont. He needed the Night's Watch to stay out of the war, or at least not stand in his way. But not everyone was so easy to convince. The Karstarks didn't trust a Targaryen. "Their fire burned our kin alive," said Lord Rickard Karstark. "Now you want us to kneel to one." Robb stepped forward, fierce and unshaking. "Then kneel to Lyanna's son. Kneel to the Stark blood that flows in his veins." Still, the Karstarks hesitated. They wanted proof, not just words. That proof came 3 weeks later. Howland Reed arrived. He was older, slower, but his eyes still burned with memory. In the great hall of Winterfell, with every lord watching, he told the truth of the Tower of Joy. How he had stood with Ned Stark. How they found Lyanna in a bed, soaked with blood, whispering the name Jon before she died. "She gave the boy to Ned," Reed said, "begged him to protect the child. "Promise me, Ned," she said, "promise me." The hall was silent. No one moved. Even the Karstarks didn't speak. Then Jon stepped forward. "I never asked for this," he said. "I was raised as a snow. I never knew my mother. I never knew my father. But if my blood can end this war, if it can bring peace, then I will fight for it." Some lords stood. Then more. Soon the hall echoed with swords drawn, men kneeling, and voices shouting, "King Jon! King Jon!" But not everyone was happy. Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister sat on her golden chair, her wine untouched, her face pale. "A Targaryen in the north?" she hissed. "Another dragon trying to crawl out of the snow?" She slammed her cup to the floor. "He will not reach the trident. He will not even see the veil. Kill him. Kill them both." Within days, gold-cloaked spies moved through the north, through the Riverlands, hiding daggers and poison in their cloaks. They were silent, deadly, and trained by the best. Jon Stark Targaryen wouldn't know what hit him, but Cersei made one mistake. She sent her men through the Vale, and the Vale still remembered Lyanna Stark. Lady Lysa Arryn, mad as she was, once loved her sister, and Littlefinger, sly and clever, saw an opportunity. If he supported Jon, he might win favor with the North, or even with Sansa if she returned. So instead of killing Jon, the Vale did the unthinkable. They joined him. 10,000 Knights of the Vale, banners flying high, rode to meet Jon and Robb. And with them came a whisper through the mountains. The North remembers, and the South should be afraid. The campfires lit up the night like fallen stars. Jon sat in his tent, his sword Longclaw resting beside him. He was no longer just a brother of the Night's Watch, no longer just Ned Stark's bastard. He was something more now, a king in truth, with men riding under his name, lords kneeling, and songs already being sung about him in the north. But with every cheer, he felt heavier. Robb entered the tent, pulling off his gloves. His face looked tired, older than before. "The Vale has sent 10,000 knights," he said. "We now have almost 30,000 men." Jon didn't smile. "And the Lannisters have more, and gold, and dragons." Robb raised an eyebrow. "Daenerys," Jon nodded. "We don't know her, but if she finds out who I am, she may not be so eager to share the Targaryen name." Robb looked thoughtful. "Then we get to the throne before she even steps on Westerosi soil." Their plan was simple, but risky. March south fast. Avoid open battle until the Riverlands. Win the loyalty of the Tullys. Then sweep across the Crownlands while the Lannisters still thought the North was too far behind to matter. But nothing in war ever goes as planned. By the time Jon's army reached the edge of the Riverlands, the land was already burning. Lannister scouts had torched villages. Women wept, children hid, fields were blackened. The war had already begun, even before Jon gave the order to fight. Then came the worst of it. One night in the rain, a northern rider rushed into the camp covered in blood. "Robb!" he shouted, falling from his horse. They got your men, the Karstarks, poisoned, in their sleep." Robb ran to the tents. Half the Karstark camp was dead. Wine mixed with blood, bread stuffed with nightshade, men foaming at the mouth. Jon stared in horror. Who did this? A whisper came from the shadows. A captured spy. He had only one name on his tongue before the guards silenced him. "Cersei!" Robb punched the tree beside him. "She wants to kill our army before we even raise a sword." "She's scared," Jon said quietly. "Good, let her be." But the North was now divided again. Lord Rickard Karstark, furious and grieving, stood in front of Jon the next morning with eyes full of hate. "My sons are dead," he growled. "And this is the price I pay for following a Targaryen." Jon stood tall. This was Cersei's doing. "Maybe," Karstark snapped, "or maybe the gods are punishing us for kneeling to a dragon." Robb stepped forward. "Watch your tongue." Karstark turned and spat. "I'll march with you, but don't expect loyalty. Not anymore." The poison had done more than kill men. It had cracked the unity of the army. Still they moved forward. By the time Jon reached Riverrun, the Tullys greeted them with open arms. Lord Edmure, proud and ready, offered food, shelter, and 3,000 men. "The South forgets us," he said. "But we have not forgotten Lyanna." The banners of wolf and trout rose together, and then news that changed everything. From the east, "A raven arrived." "She's coming," Robb said, reading the message. "Who?" Jon asked. Robb's eyes were sharp now. "Daenerys Targaryen." "With dragons." The army fell into silence. 2 Targaryens, 1 throne, and 1 truth that no one wanted to say aloud. Only one of them could sit on it. The sky burned red when the dragons came. From the hills beyond the Trident, people looked up in fear as wings blocked out the sun. 3 dragons flew high, shadows of death across the land. Behind them marched an army unlike anything Jon had ever seen, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, foreign soldiers with strange armor and deadly skills, and leading them all, a silver-haired queen with eyes like frozen fire, Daenerys Targaryen. Jon watched her army arrive from the Tower of Riverrun. He didn't speak. His face didn't change. But inside, something twisted. "She's here," Robb said beside him. "What do we do?" "We meet her," Jon replied. "Before swords are drawn, before blood is spilled." That night, under the full moon, the 2 Targaryens stood face to face for the first time. Daenerys looked at Jon with curiosity, not kindness. "So, you're the one they call the Wolf Dragon," she said. Jon didn't smile. "And you're the queen who says she was born to rule?" "I was," Daenerys said. "And I will." Jon's voice stayed calm. "Then we have a problem." "Because I was born too." They sat in a cold stone room, with only Robb, Tyrion, and Ser Davos watching. The silence between them was sharp, heavy. Daenerys leaned forward. "You say you're Rhaegar's son. Do you have proof?" Jon nodded. "We do, a letter." "A witness?" "Howland Reed." Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "And if that's true, that means you're not just a Targaryen. You're the last male heir." Robb looked at Daenerys. "And you're not the only dragon anymore." For a moment, Daenerys' eyes darkened. Then she stood. "I did not cross deserts, oceans, and burn slavers for nothing. I freed people. I bled for this. I earned the throne. And I never wanted it," Jon said. "But my people are dying. And your dragons won't change that unless you fight for them, not rule them." Daenerys turned toward him. "Then bend the knee." Jon didn't move. "No." Robb placed a hand on his sword. Tension filled the room like smoke before a fire. Then Tyrion stepped forward. "We're not enemies, not yet. Two Targaryens in one war will only kill more people. We need unity, or everything falls to ash. Daenerys stared at Jon. And if I don't share the crown? Jon's voice dropped. Then you become the very thing you swore to destroy. Silence again. She walked out without a word. Later that night, Robb met Jon near the river. The water was dark, cold. She won't join us, Robb said. She doesn't see me as blood, Jon replied. She sees me as a threat, Robb clenched his jaw. Then we fight, with or without her. But just then another raven came, a small letter sealed in black wax. Jon read it. His hands froze. What is it? Robb asked. Jon's voice was low, heavy. The wall has fallen. The dead are marching. Robb's face turned pale. The White Walkers. Jon nodded. They broke through Eastwatch. The Night's Watch is gone. Everything stopped. War, thrones, titles. It all suddenly meant nothing, because the real enemy wasn't in King's Landing, was coming from the north, and winter had already begun. Snow fell harder than ever. The world turned white. But this time it wasn't peaceful. It was death in slow motion. The dead were coming. Jon stood in front of the map table, his fists tight, his face hard. Eastwatch is gone. The wall is broken. We don't have time to fight over crowns. Robb paced the room. You think Daenerys will listen now? She has to, Jon said, because if we don't fight together, we'll all die together. So he sent a message, a simple one. The Night King is coming. The war is not for the throne, it's for the living, to everyone. The North, the South, the Vale, the Reach, even to Cersei Lannister. The response? Silence, except one. Daenerys Targaryen returned. She flew in on Drogon, landing in the snowy fields outside River Run. The ground shook. Soldiers dropped their swords in fear, but Jon stood tall. She walked toward him. Her face had changed, and not proud, not cold, serious. Her eyes held the weight of old pain. I saw the fire in the sky, she said. I believe you now, he nodded. Will you fight with us? She looked away for a moment, then met his eyes. Yes, I will fight. Together they gathered what they could. Robb called every house loyal to the north and the Riverlands. The Vale stayed true, sending knights. Daenerys brought her Unsullied, her Dothraki, and 2 dragons. But time was running out. Scouts returned with stories no one wanted to hear. Towns empty, bodies missing. Cold wind blowing from the north like a scream. And then came the real terror. They saw it, an army of corpses stretching for miles. Blue eyes glowing, faces twisted in frozen death. And above them all, riding a dead horse with silence like a storm, the Night King. He had a face like ice and hatred in his eyes. And worst of all, he had a dragon, Viserion, killed and raised by him, undead, wings torn, eyes blue. Jon watched it fly in the sky, breathing blue fire that burned colder than ice. We're not ready, Robb whispered. We don't have a choice, Jon said. They made their stand at Moat Cailin, the neck of the north. If they could stop the dead there, maybe they'd have a chance to save the south. Jon stood before the gathered army. I was born in shadow, he said. I was raised in silence, but now I know who I am. Not a Snow, not a Stark, not just a Targaryen. I am a man who will fight until the end. Not for power, not for crowns, but for every child who still breathes. For every mother waiting for her son to return. The army cheered. Even Daenerys looked at him with something close to respect. Maybe even more. That night, she visited his tent. You speak like a king, she said. I speak like a man who's tired of war, he replied. She hesitated, then asked softly, if we survive this, will you still want the throne? Jon looked her in the eyes. If we survive this, I'll be happy just to see the sun again. Daenerys smiled, a real one, for the first time, but far in the woods. Cold footsteps moved closer. The dead had arrived, and the war for the living was about to begin. The cold came first, a deep, sharp silence, like the world had stopped breathing. Then, the screams. The army of the dead crashed into the living like a wave of bones and ice. At Moat Cailin, swords clashed. Shields broke, arrows flew, but nothing slowed the dead. They did not feel pain. They did not fear death, because they were death. Jon fought in the front. His sword, long claw, flashed silver as he cut through the whites. Blood and snow mixed beneath his boots. His face was marked with ash, dirt, and rage. But still he fought. Robb Stark led the right flank, shouting orders, holding the line. His direwolf Grey Wind tore through corpses beside him. Robb was no longer the young wolf. He was a warlord, fighting for his home, for his people. Daenerys flew above on Drogon, burning rows of the undead with fire. But even dragonfire couldn't stop the Night King. He rode his dead dragon through the sky, aiming for one thing, Jon Snow. The Night King knew who Jon was, knew the truth in his blood, knew the danger he posed. As Jon turned to help a fallen soldier, he looked up and saw blue fire crashing toward him. Drogon dove in at the last second, blocking the blast. He roared in pain, wings scorched, but he kept flying. Daenerys screamed his name, pulling him away. Jon rolled onto his feet. His eyes burned. "No more running," he said. He charged toward the Night King alone. The two met in the center of the battlefield, surrounded by fire, snow, and death. Jon swung. The Night King blocked. They fought with blade and ice. Every strike shook the ground. Every breath was pain. Jon gave everything he had, his fury, his grief, his whole soul. But the Night King was stronger. He knocked Jon to the ground, raised his icy blade. And then a wolf's howl cut through the night. Robb, he came charging in, covered in blood, eyes wild, blade ready, together. Robb and Jon fought side by side, Stark and Targaryen, cousins by blood, brothers by heart. But the Night King was too powerful, just when all hope seemed lost. Daenerys flew down, fast, screaming, furious, and Drogon let out one final roar of fire, blazing hotter than ever before, hitting the Night King dead on. This time, the fire worked. The Night King screamed, not in rage but in fear, and shattered into 1,000 icy shards. The dead army stopped, frozen in place. Then, one by one, they collapsed. Bones turned to dust. Silence returned. The living had won, but victory came with a price. Robb had been stabbed during the final fight. Jon knelt beside him, holding his hand. "I'm sorry, brother," Robb whispered. "I won't see the world we fought for." Jon's eyes filled with tears. "You will, in every free breath, in every saved life. You will," Robb smiled faintly, and died in his arms. Weeks later, the North began to heal. Fires burned for the dead. Graves filled the land. Jon stood before the lords and soldiers, wearing black and silver armor. He looked tired, but stronger than ever. He raised his hand. "I do not want a crown," he said. "But if you need a voice, I will speak for the living." The crowd chanted his name. Even Daenerys stood in silence, nodding. She had lost a dragon, but gained something else. A man who could lead not through fear, but through truth. In the end, they ruled together, not as king and queen in love, but as partners in peace, a Stark Targaryen alliance, a North free and proud, and a throne no longer built on lies and fire, but on blood, pain, and the courage to change the world. Snow was melting slowly in the north, but Jon's heart still felt cold. Robb was gone. His brother, his other half, the man who had believed in him when no one else did. Jon now walked through Winterfell's halls, not as a brother, not even as a king, but as a symbol. People bowed to him. Lords sent him gifts. Even ravens from across Westeros brought messages calling him the king who saved the realm. But Jon didn't feel like a king. He sat in the Godswood one evening, beside the old weirwood tree. The red leaves blew around him like falling blood. Ghost, his direwolf, sat close, watching quietly. Daenerys arrived, wrapped in a dark cloak. "Everyone's waiting," she said. "For what?" Jon whispered. "For you, to decide what kind of world you want to build." He looked up at her. "I never wanted to build a world. I just wanted to stop it from falling apart." Daenerys stepped closer. "Then let me help you." Their eyes met, not with passion, but with respect. With shared pain. They had both lost too much. Together they began working to rebuild the kingdoms. Jon sent food to starving villages. He pardoned houses that had once fought against him. He let the North remain free, led by Sansa Stark, now called the Lady of Winter. But the South was not so peaceful. Cersei was dead, killed by her own madness during the chaos of the dead. But her son, Tommen, had survived, taken in secret by a group of old Lannister loyalists. They had hidden him away in the Stormlands, raising him to hate the Targaryen usurper, and now he was 15, and ready. One night a raven arrived. Jon opened the letter slowly. His jaw clenched as he read the words, "The true king of Westeros lives. The North will kneel or burn." Daenerys stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. "He's a boy. He's a Lannister," Jon said. "Raised by those who only know power and revenge." She nodded slowly. "This will not end without more blood." Jon looked at the fire burning in the hearth. "Then we try to stop it before it begins." But the boy king wasn't waiting. Within a month, the golden lion banners flew again. A new army, smaller but funded by old gold and new hate, marched through the Crownlands. They didn't attack cities yet, but they burned villages loyal to Jon, and people began to question him. "Why don't you strike back? Why show mercy to enemies who want us dead?" Whispers spread. Some called him too soft. Some said Daenerys should take command and finish what Aegon began. With dragonfire, even she started changing. Jon noticed it in her eyes. The way she stared into the flames too long. The way her voice grew colder when talking about enemies. The way she said, "They deserve it more than we must try to help them." Jon feared something, not just war, but that Daenerys was becoming what she once swore she'd destroy. Winter had passed, but a storm was still coming. Tommen Lannister's army had grown. Small lords who once feared Daenerys now whispered behind her back. They said Jon had gone soft, that he ruled with heart, not with strength. And Daenerys, she was changing. She stopped smiling. She started giving orders without asking Jon first. She spoke more about fear than love. She watched the sky like it was hers, like she owned it, and one night she made her move. The boy King Tommen had captured Blackwater Bay, claiming it in his name. His soldiers had taken hostages, and when word reached Dragonstone, Daenerys didn't wait. She flew, not to talk, to burn. Drogon soared through the sky, roaring louder than thunder. The city watched in horror as flames lit up the night. Soldiers screamed. Children cried. The fire didn't care who it touched. By morning, Blackwater Bay was ashes. Jon arrived too late. The smoke still rose. The smell of burnt flesh filled the air. He walked through the ruins and saw something worse than death. Fear, not of the Lannisters, of Daenerys. She stood in the ashes, her hair blowing in the wind, her eyes glowing with power. "I gave them a chance," she said. "They chose war." Jon didn't speak. She turned to him. "We won, Jon. This is what victory looks like." He looked at the burned bodies, the twisted faces, the dead children. "This isn't victory," he said softly. "This is becoming the thing we swore to fight." That night Jon sat alone in his tent. Ghost lay beside him, quiet and watchful. He thought of Robb, of Ned, of the promise he had made to fight for the living, not for a throne. Daenerys had broken that promise. She hadn't done it out of madness. She did it because she believed only fire could fix a broken world. And Jon finally understood. She would never stop. If anyone rose against her, she'd burn them too, even the North, even Sansa. The next morning, Jon entered the Red Keep. Daenerys stood before the Iron Throne. She looked at it like a dream come true. Her fingers reached out, but she never sat. Jon stepped forward. She smiled. "It's over." Jon didn't smile back. "It's not over," he said, "because you've already started the next war." She stepped toward him slowly. "They won't understand, Jon, but we will build a better world." Jon's voice broke. "At what cost?" She whispered, "Whatever it takes." Jon leaned in, kissed her one last time, and as their lips touched, he slid a dagger into her heart. She gasped. Eyes wide, tears fell, blood spilled. "I'm sorry," Jon whispered. "I love you, but I had to choose the world." She died in his arms, her last breath soft as snow. Drogon felt it. He flew in, roaring in pain. His fire lit the skies, but he didn't burn Jon. Instead, he melted the Iron Throne itself, turned it into a pool of molten steel. And then Drogon flew away carrying her body. Disappearing into the clouds, Jon was left behind, alone. Weeks passed. Jon refused the crown. He gave it to Sansa, who ruled the north as queen. The south chose a council, a new system of rule. Without thrones, without dragons. Jon returned to the north, far north, beyond the wall, to the free folk, to the snow and silence, where there were no kings, no wars, just a man who gave up everything to save everyone. They would forget his name in songs, but the world he left behind, it lived.